Yes, we're now recording.
All right, then welcome everybody again to this week's cohort call. We are currently in week 7 and we are talking about open hardware specifics today. It's our peer review session. As always, Andre already said this call will be recorded except for the breakout rooms. You can turn off your camera, obviously, if you want to, but please turn it on for the breakout rooms because we think it's nicer for a direct conversation. We will upload the recordings to our YouTube channel and well, just that you know, and we also encourage you, no, we don't not even encourage, please, all interaction must respect our community guidelines. And if some problems should come up, or if you see somebody not respecting or violating our community guidelines, please let us know, send us an email, write us via your favorite messages service, email, Twitter, Signal, whatever you choose. So this is something you should already have done. Go to the notes if you are not yet there. And please, Andre, can you share some of the statements which were already shared? Because we were asking for your favorite time of the year. So what's in the document?
So a little bit like yesterday, people really enjoy summer and spring. And then different from yesterday, from Hilda, because she's in Singapore, there isn't really any seasons. So it's either sunny or raining. And she likes a lot the monsoon season, which is December and January.
Ah, I see. That's a really interesting. So, well, as we also discussed yesterday, I mean, it really depends on where on this planet you are living. Right. But, well, let's dive now into like our today's call. So this is where we are right now. So we almost reached half of our program. Today we are peer reviewing what you already did or taking another look in regards to open hardware specifics. As Andre already mentioned in the very beginning, please send us your information for our expert review. We already sent this to you via email, via our Monday email twice. Please complete the form. Andre shared the link already. The link should also be in the document. The deadline is actually tomorrow. Please do that. So just a quick recap now from last week. Not last week, but the week actually before. We talked about version control, modularity, your minimal viable project in general, and your documentation plan. And something which comes up for this week or last week already is accessible documentation, bills of material, skills, machines. We will dive a bit deeper into this today, and digital fabrication and electronics, as well as user and developer guides. So we already talked about different roles in regards to documentation, but we want to, well, look a bit deeper into this topic. So this is the respective site on the curriculum webpage. If you have not done so yet, please take a look at all the different sections, because as always, here in this call, we're only touching some of the things we have prepared in much more detail in our curriculum. So please, if you need more information, you can always ask us, but please also look at our curriculum. It's a great resource, we think, for a lot of different things. So on the agenda for today is digital fabrication and electronics. We want to discuss with you, well, proprietary versus open source tools for building open projects. And we will take a look at also minimal viable documentation. And we have our guest speaker today. Martin will talk about LOSH, the Library of Open Science Hardware. And we decided just a few minutes ago that we will do this talk just like as the very first thing for today's agenda. So let's give it a go. LOSH, yeah, Library of Open Source Hardware. Well, I also already introduced you, Mo or Martin. Well, maybe you can quickly tell a bit more about yourself, and you can also share your screen if you want, if you prepared a presentation or something. So I will stop sharing now, and welcome, and thank you very much already.
Yeah, thanks again for the invitation. Hi, good afternoon. Martin, people call me Mo. That's a long story that I can spare for the bonus afterwards. I'm a researcher and activist in the domain of open source hardware, mainly in the realm of infrastructure building. When I decided to go into the field, I didn't want to invent every machine by myself, but rather contribute to an infrastructure that facilitates everybody to do so. That was mainly organizing funding for projects, resolving legal issues, and working in standardization. And yeah, also doing a lot of lobby work. So with LOSH, I want to present a project I've been working on for the past 2 years and still working on. Yeah, no, that's not what I want to share. Maybe I can share just the advanced. Oh no, portion of the screen. I can only share desktop. Okay, whatever. So you see what I see. No, full screen, better. Good. Yeah, welcome. The Library of Open Source Hardware, or technically speaking, a distributed knowledge base for open source hardware. Before I begin, like all of my slides, these are also open source. So the link to the slides is here. I can later share it in the chat, and you can find the source, use it as you want. And the project is running under the Fraunhofer Institute in Berlin, the IPK under the EU Horizon 2020 project Open Next. So it was all about open source hardware, and the big promise of open source hardware is that if you develop something open source, then you can build upon things that others have developed before, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time, and you get connection to the communities and things. But especially for newcomers, the reality is often a little more complicated. So the issue, or that's one of the issues that I would condense into a term like isolated innovation. People in the end do their invention for themselves and don't find things that are published online. I think the pub and ventilator project is a good example to illustrate that. When the COVID pandemic started, many makers around the globe gathered to cope with shortages, for example, in ventilators. And so was the Puppet project from the US, but they had the bright moment to check online before if there is already a design published. And out of that grew a project that only is assessing existing documentation of ventilator designs, because there were so many. So by now, the huge spreadsheet includes 145 individual ventilator designs. That means that 145 times the ventilator has been invented. Just in the open source world, there are also the proprietary ones. So this is obviously getting better since the Puppet project merged some of these and is organizing conferences and things, but you get the idea that this is a general problem also for other technology domains. And fun fact aside, in the list, about half and less of the projects that they found are actually open source, so use a free open license. The others are just it's a bunch of PDF files published online, so there's a misunderstanding there, but that's a different topic for another talk, I guess. So what we wanted to do with LOSH is to connect these, let's say, islands of innovation. We wanted to make open source hardware explorable also for non-geeks. So there are thousands of different platforms where you could upload your open source designs, but if you're new to the scene, you don't know that these platforms exist and how to use them. We want to make these hardware designs comparable after standardized criteria, specifically the metadata, so you can rapidly assess whether the design works for use case or not, and without needing to dive deeply into the actual technical documentation. And we wanted to make it linkable, platform independent, so that the innovation can be shared and is searchable, platform independent. Also for research, linked open data is a great thing, but that's more geeky. Yeah, that overall overarching aim was to support design reuse of already published open source hardware. So this isn't exactly new. There is the Open Know-how Initiative that was founded, I think, 2018 or so. I was there. I was former maintainer of the standard. They published a metadata specification for open source hardware products. So yeah, a list of fields that you would need to deliver that people could assess what to do with this open source design. Then to follow this specification, you needed to submit your metadata at a central spreadsheet that they provided on GitHub. And then they had they still have a front end for searching through the spreadsheet. Obviously, this approach is a little limited because it all relies on manual input. But they were successful anyways. But we wanted to take this a little further with Lush. So what we did was reworking the metadata specification to make it to enable linked open data. So we also had a machine readable version of that. We built a crawler-based distributed knowledge base. So the data itself is distributed among the web. The crawler gets the data from there and then converts it into linked open data. So into RDF and then connects the dots. And that makes it, for example, searchable in kind of a meta search. And then you get a single search bar and then you can type in your technology. That's how it looks in practice. That's actually live, small iframe in the slides. So you can type in any technology, let's say casting, and then it searches. Yeah, and you get a few results for that. And then or I don't know if the Olum is still here. Let's see. Yeah, here. Ah, the picture is broken. Okay, there are a few bugs to fix. And then you have like basic metadata about the design. You can get to the repository, check it out there. And also, okay, it opened a new tab. And also download all information that is, or all files that are associated with the thing. The projects are automatically versioned. And yeah, and you can filter for several things. Not so much yet. You should be able to filter for the technology readiness level and the certification status and these kind of things, but that doesn't work yet. There's a lot to say about this. That's just for now. No, that's another slide. So at the moment we host projects from the following platforms. So we get about 450 projects from GitHub. We get about the same amount from Wikifactory. That's, by the way, around 10% of all projects of Wikifactory. So most of them are basically proprietary. We filter out all projects that are not open source or that are having a mostly empty repository. Then we get about 550 projects from Apropedia, a platform for appropriate technology. We also get everything that was published under the former Open Know-how specification. So that's about 150 projects. We now get also OSHWA. So this slide is outdated. The module works since yesterday evening. This is about like 750. And then Thingiverse. Thingiverse is huge. The number is just an estimate. The quarter is still going through all these projects. Their API is broken, so we needed to build a workaround to go through all of them. They have about 5 million projects, but the sample that I had showed that around 60% of them could be used for Lush. Yeah. Now some technical details so you understand how the stuff actually works. We have the knowledge base in the center. We use Wikibase for that. Wouldn't recommend, by the way, but the project obligated us to use Wikibase. We have diverse input channels from different platforms and diverse output channels. So not only the search engine, we also have the data itself published elsewhere and other data derived from that. So, and you have 4 methods how data is uploaded to Lush, how you could connect your project to this. The first and recommended way is directly through the platform's API. So if you host your documentation on a platform that is integrated on our side, for example, Wikifactory, then the data is automatically uploaded by the API from the crawler to Lush. There's no interaction from the user side needed to connect your project to Lush. So when, yeah, as said, if you have your project on Wikifactory, it will be automatically found by the crawler, and you can search it on Lush. If you choose to use any other platform, you could also just host the metadata in a so-called manifest file on a platform that we can support, for example, GitHub. There's a central repository from us, so you could send it by mail to us and we host it there. But also if you host it anywhere on GitHub, we would find your manifest file, and then the documentation gets linked to Lush as well. There is also a workaround if we have a lot of manifest files on another platform. So for example, Apropedia has loads of projects there, so we can build for these cases a script that gets these manifest files or creates them basically and then hosts them on GitLab, same procedure. Or for geeks or platforms, you could also just send the data directly through the API to our Wikibase instance, and then it's also on Lush. Yeah, what is special about the approach, to wrap up? You only will find open source hardware there. So there's no open washing, there's no proprietary license, no non-commercial, non-derivative, all that stuff. You will not find it there. And we also exclude all projects that are empty. So if you don't have any other files than a README and an image or a contribution guide, then you will not appear on Lush. You need at least one other file. So it qualifies at least for the ideation status. On the platform itself, you can find, filter, compare projects by their name, licensing scheme, certification status, documentation readiness level, patent class, and so on. You can also do this directly on the databases. So you fork the whole knowledge base if you want. So it's all published under CC0, the data, and all software modules that we use are also open source. And as said, it's linked open data, and that's very cool because you can directly link to primary information for licensing, for example, or for the patent classes. That is a very useful feature. Yeah, I also want to talk about some serious issues that we had. The top 5. Compatibility of data is a thing because every platform uses its own data scheme, and then finding a way to map them and bridge between these specifications wasn't trivial and not always possible. Reliability of data was a bigger problem than thought. So OSHWA, for example, has a faulty database. We didn't know that before, but we found when calling that that a lot of data was simply not right. So we connected with OSHWA, and now we're working on fixing the database with some scripts. Yeah, our main limitations were limited. We are mainly limited by the APIs of the platforms that we use and bugs that they have, and their willingness to fix them. For example, Thingiverse doesn't seem to show any, or how was it, MakerBot or so, the company behind Thingiverse doesn't show any interest to fix their API, so we needed to develop this workaround. Compatibility of software modules, huge issue. That's why I wouldn't recommend Wikibase for that. It's great for the use of Wikimedia instances, but not for something else. And one of our Koala developers said it was the project of edge cases only. Like, it is very impressive what people upload as metadata, and we needed to fix a lot there and take some security measures. Yeah, I hope that wasn't too much at once. Let's discuss things. Let's give me a few questions. I also have some bonus slides for other related projects around Lush if you fancy. But first, let's give a stage for questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And well, now the floor is open.
I have a question. So, hi Martin, thanks a lot for your talk. I was wondering if, when you're looking, for example, on GitHub for open hardware projects, how do you actually differentiate between open source software and open source hardware? Like, is it like on a file type or?
Very good point. Yet we do, the short answer, yet we do not do that. the only differentiation that we have is when it comes directly from a platform and is flagged as or tagged as open source hardware, but GitHub doesn't do that. And if a project has a manifest file, so a dedicated file for metadata for open source hardware, so someone else tagged it on GitHub as open source hardware with the dedicated metadata. However, we also get the file types. So if we find CAD data and if we open license, so there is indication that this could be an open source hardware project, but this couldn't be realized yet. I think there are a lot more projects on GitHub that could be called that way, yes.
So if I have a project on GitHub, I hopefully should add a manifest file or something.
By the moment, that's the only way, yeah. Okay. We have a web interface that helps you creating these manifest files. So it's like a web form where you click and put in the license to use and name and function, and then you just need to upload it.
Okay.
I will share this in the chat. I think if I
shared on the chat. We're gonna touch the standard that Martin is talking about on module 6. This is the open know-how standard. Then Lush has I think version 2.0 of that standard. I don't know, like Martin, correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, like we're gonna learn how to actually put this manifest into our projects in module 6 together with the specific licenses for open source hardware.
Yes, and also something you said, Martin, we will take up today actually is about, like, in the very beginning we were talking about the ventilators, and that only 50% are really open source. And we are talking about this today in the topic digital fabrication and what file types to share, because a PDF is not, it's an export format and it's great for sharing information, but not for sharing really the source of a project.
Yeah, definitely. We can also talk a little more about that. We had, maybe I should mention that. One of my bigger projects the past years was DIN-SPEC 3105. That was a standard for the documentation of open source hardware. So what needs to be delivered that it would qualify as real open source hardware as it is intended to be, plus a certification scheme for this. And the certification scheme drafted a process, a community-based process, how this is assessed. So we wouldn't end up with, again, big certification bodies where it costs huge amounts of money to get a certificate for something. And we have run a first certification wave last year at 2 organizations. So there are now 2 so-called conformity assessment bodies for DIN-SPEC 3105, where you could submit your hardware projects and then get official attribution that you could then use, for example, for when applying for funds for research grants, for example.
We're also going to cover the DIN-SPEC on module 6. So stay tuned for the next modules if you really, really want to know more about all of this stuff.
Yeah, Mo does so many nice things. So we had a hard time where and when to invite him, but we think that this Lush also gives a nice overview of what's actually out there also, and how open hardware can be found, and so on and so on. what I was wondering actually is what you showed is that you all now included Thingiverse, and everybody who already was on Thingiverse knows that not all of the projects which are shared on Thingiverse are really like have a high quality, let's say. I mean, there are also a lot of just stupid figurines and whatever. So you, yeah, and I just was typing in some things in Lush and saw that for each thing I basically look for, there are like at least 20 Thingiverse projects in there. So it's got a bit flooded, right, with now Thingiverse projects. Is there any way you can actually, well, maintain a certain standard that you don't have like just super simple 3D models in there?
So there are, okay, first in the search you can exclude different data sources and then say I don't want to find anything from Thingiverse. Regarding the search itself, that is rather a organizational issue than a technical one. Our main, I think I should share this publicly. Our main development partner for this was Wikimedia, and I was very amazed to work with Wikimedia, but it was the by far worst cooperation experience I have. So they didn't carry out any development so far, but got all the cash from the EU. So with the few bucks left on my side, I was able to organize development mainly in the open source software community. And they were responsible for the front end and also the search, and it doesn't comply with the requirements that I sent beforehand. But at the moment, nobody's really up to fix the front end because we want to fix the back end first. We want to use another technology than Wikibase because it's very hard to maintain and just simply doesn't work for us. And it's also a reason why search is very difficult. So once this is fixed, we have someone working on that for the next 6 months. Then I hope it's going to be a lot better. Including the filtering. So if you filter for, we wanted to connect different category systems from different platforms. And the most stable one we found was actually the patent classification system. So there you could exclude also artistic material, for example, if you don't want to find figures. Other than that, there is a scheme for the technology readiness of machines. So if you are in the conception phase yet, or if it's a safe product to use that has a CE certification, the scheme is new. I had a publication on this last month or so. I don't know if it's already published. Yeah, and it's used on Lush. So the crawler tries to map the tags and things that is found on Thingiverse, for example, onto these schemes and then assign this automatically.
Great, thank you.
Could I make a comment for the purpose of the groups and in this cohort? I think it's worth to think about a lot what Martin said about the ventilators, and how we've been talking a lot about finding collaborators and finding people that are interested in the same things as you are, and why then having the manifest that would be able to put you as a project listed in Lush would allow you to find similar-minded people to get in touch with, right? Because then you find all of the projects that are related to your project, and B, try to avoid reinventing 150, was it 150 different ventilators?
145, but yes.
Yeah, right. And so like this, like try to think, I mean, we're like super happy to talk about the tech aspect of this, but thinking about like the social human aspect of having all of this listed in one place, it's really like much better than having to Google for things and trying to find it like in all of this dispersed things. So it might be like a good place to also gain visibility once you have your project with a minimal documentation, so that people can find you and get in touch and so on, right? So this is maybe one extra reason why to put things on Lush and use this manifest, right? Because this manifest is common to several, I mean, it's a manifest that can be used by several different groups. once you have this one manifest, and we're going to cover this again in Unit 6, you can be found by many different places, whether or not you are on Losh or not, but basically you couldn't potentially be found by many other places, which is then also a nice thing, which is similar to being listed on the OSHA certification list, right? Sorry, yes, I'm digressing a little bit. And being mindful of time, maybe we should, like, are there any other questions from the participants of the call? Is there anything else you'd like to ask Martin, or is there anything else, Martin, you would like to add?
If there's anything, always feel free to reach out per mail or however to me. I am under a lot of workload lately, so I will likely not answer this week or next week. But summer is going to be a lot smoother because I'm quitting my job at Fraunhofer. Because you may have seen that there is a first big prototype released from open source imaging. So now we have a open source MRI scanner that could scan your anything with a diameter less than 30 centimeters. And I found this very exciting. And the only thing yet missing is a company that brings this in the market and distributes them in the world. And I would hate myself forever if I don't take this opportunity. So yeah.
Amazing, that's great. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Let's see if it works out.
You are always invited to join us also again for licenses and standards if you like to, but maybe we can talk about like a short video or something like this if you want.
We have a small group at Open Source College Germany covering legal issues. Among them, 2 lawyers from Hamburg that were working on a guideline of these legal issues and how to avoid them. We had a workshop last Friday that was recorded, and there will be a next one. So if you have any legal questions, it is either already answered in the guideline, and if not, send them to me so we can address them in the next call. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. We will share this information via email so everybody knows, and also because we have 2 groups, the other groups also know that. Thank you very much, Martin. So you are welcome to stay, but we will go more now into our program. Or is there any other question?
I don't see any other questions. No.
No. All righty. Then I will share my screen again. Just a second. Wrong share button. Sorry.
Should I share it on my side?
No,
Okay.
no. I'm just like pressing the wrong button, and then it's like, yeah, you probably know the meme. Oh no, this process, this will cost us at least 1 year. This small detour. Anyway, so let's quickly talk about digital fabrication and electronics. And I really like that Martin actually already touched it in the very beginning with the ventilators. And yeah, we already talked about it a bit. But a very important thing we want to point out for you is that there are different formats you can share your digital fabrication design and also electronics design, and we want to just give you some recommendation there. In general, I don't think I have to explain to you what digital fabrication and electronics is. I mean, with the rise of 3D printing, desktop 3D printers and so on, we saw also a surge of like a lot of open hardware projects coming up, and this is a really great development. But still, as you could already see with the ventilators, still, not everything which is just published online is really open source, and it really depends on what you share and how you share it. And we talked a lot about accessibility already, accessibility of documentation in terms of also like readability, understandability, and so on. But now let's talk a bit about the hard facts, about export formats and source formats. Martin already said that there were some projects which were just sharing the designs on a PDF. A PDF is a great format, as I already said, but it's an export format. It's good to share information but it's probably not really good to, for example, 3D print a design, or for example, edit a design, adjust it to one's needs. And that's why there are also source formats which you should share. Okay, well, export formats still have a use. If you divide between, or if you distinguish users and also developers for your project, right? You have people who want just to, for example, 3D print a part, then it's probably easier and better for them to use an STL file, because they can just drop it in their slicer, and their 3D printing slicer, and just, well, print it. So, but if you have people who want to contribute to your project, or if you want to, well, enable, well, modifying your project, then you should always share source formats. For vector graphics, we have SVGs as basically a open standard for vector graphics, but for CAD designs, so computer-assisted designs, like for 3D printing or PCBs, it's a bit more complicated. So what we put there are 3 different software examples: OpenSCAD, FreeCAD, and KiCad, which are therefore, well, 3D CAD design, and KiCad is used mainly to design PCBs or circuits in general. And what you always should do is share your source files. Just put them into your, well, repository, if it's on GitHub or whatever, Wikifactory, or wherever you share your data, you host your open source project. And this is also the ideal that you use an open software to build your project. And we will discuss this a bit more later, like in the next step. But we don't want to, well, keep you from like publishing also proprietary source files. So no source file is bad, right? And sharing a proprietary source file, for example, from Fusion 360 or something like this for CAD design. CAD design is a bit doubled, right? For CAD, it's better than sharing nothing. So think about it, think about what you share, and just look at it from different perspective, from a user perspective and also a developer perspective. So somebody who wants just to rebuild your project, and a person who wants to modify it or wants maybe help you to build or improve the project. So what we want you now to, well, share is what software you are using for digital fabrication, and, well, have like a short discussion about it, because we want to know what you think about what should you use for an open hardware project, proprietary versus open source software. And we would like to hear your opinion, which software, which is maybe proprietary, can't actually be avoided. And yeah, you can take your time to think about it, but please just give it a go, unmute yourself, and share, yeah, well, your experience, your take on it. Well, just a comment, and like just sharing how you handle this is already great for us. So please just unmute yourself and go ahead. Andreas.
Yes, so well, for vector graphics, if I do anything in 2D, like laser cutting or so, I'm using Inkscape. So I guess that's a very common choice. Like Inkscape is fully featured and easy to use and open source. So I guess there is no reason to not to use it. For 3D CAD, it's different in my opinion. So I'm personally using, for simple things, I'm using OpenSCAD, and for more advanced things, I'm using Fusion 360, which is not open source, obviously. I actually tried to use FreeCAD, but my experience was not that great. So I was trying to use or to modify another open hardware project for my needs, basically converting from US to metric material, and it was so bad, so I gave up on that, and I'm not using FreeCAD anymore. Maybe I'll try it again if, I don't know, next major release or so. But I'm now stuck with Fusion 360 basically.
Yeah, Fusion 360 is actually a good example why you actually should not use why you should not use proprietary software for open hardware projects. I mean, like for me personally, I also started with Fusion 360, but what they did, I think it's already like 2 years ago, when they started closing down and limiting, like really limiting the things you could do with private accounts, because earlier, just for an explanation, it was possible to have a private account for personal use, and it basically had almost all the features the commercial version had, like the official version. But they like really limited that. And I guess you have the education access, or maybe also a professional access. And this basically avoids all these problems. But from my experience and from what I read, many people were locked out actually, because they were losing important features which were important for them. I loved it as well. But like just one question. So when was it? When did you use FreeCAD? Because after Fusion 360 did this, many turned to FreeCAD, and it developed quite a lot since then.
It was like a year ago.
I see. Okay. So it's probably still the last release. Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, maybe similar opinion, but I want to compare to the development of KiCad, for example. Nowadays, I'm using KiCad quite much for private projects. I even thinking it's now with version 6 better than the old Eagle ones. And but earlier, when KiCad was in early versions 5 or also 4, it was for me similar FreeCAD now. So for CAD design, we're also using Fusion, and I do not really have a problem with the private use license so far. For mainly, I'm using it to more like simple, not so complicated 3D printable things, and for that, this private license is working.
So from my experience, or from what I then heard, was that that many people who actually developed also plugins, like from the community, then were not able to use the plugins anymore. And I think also the amount of models you can actually work on or save are also limited. These are like different. Well, I mean, I'm not saying I want to be dogmatic here. As I said, I was actually forced more or less to use FreeCAD because I was switching completely to Linux, and then it's absolutely not possible anymore to use Fusion 360 because running it in an emulator or something like this just really does not work for me.
Yes, yeah. So this is one example, right? For us to consider as well in the long run, that if you're using proprietary software, you might exclude other people from being able to contribute, right? In the case of Fusion, there is like a free license as far as I understand, but there might be software that you need to pay, and therefore you're automatically excluding like people that might be contributors, right? A part of our discussion yesterday was also on the point of, if you have people that are willing to contribute, but only know how to use proprietary software, like how do you try to guide this, right? Because you cannot, yeah, exactly, right, Dennis? So you cannot actually tell them, look, you have to come in, but you have to use FreeCAD, right? And they might not know how to use it. And then the question is like, how do you navigate these things, right? And of course, we don't have definite solutions for anything. Like Alex mentioned, we try not to be dogmatic. But these are things to keep in mind and consider and try. For instance, one of the examples that I have is for one of the projects here, somebody created something on a piece of software called Inventor, which we don't have a license for. And so what I found was somebody wrote a piece of plugin for FreeCAD that took the Inventor file and converted that to FreeCAD. And that worked well enough for what we needed. So I was able to actually import it, right? And so for you guys that are developing projects, maybe think about looking, if you're gonna go the open source route, like try to look for software that it's mature and stable, that more people might have contributed with plugins that actually take these proprietary formats and convert it into something that is actually non-proprietary anymore. And so this would be like a way of cobbling these contributions together in a central, like open source manner, right? Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I have a comment on this as well. Like, well, you listed a step to be an export format in the previous slide, and in my experience, having a step file is almost as good as having the original file, especially if you're going from one CAD system to another. So you have to like jump borders anyway. So step file is mostly good, and at least with my CAD designs, which are not like very well structured and so. So sometimes I even re-import a step file anyway, just to have like a clean basis to work on. So I think that if you publish step files, or you should publish step files anyway, you should publish your source files, but step files anyway, because that enables like users from a different platform to work with almost the original data. And so that's what I'm going for. Like I'm using Fusion, and I know, okay, not everybody can use it or will use it, but I'll publish the step files, and which should be fine for doing most modifications and so on.
And that's actually what we want to reach here, right? We want to make you sensible for this kind of things, right? So this is exactly how you should do it, right? We don't want to be dogmatic. We just want to be like prepare this projects in a way so they are as open as they can be. And they are still open source, and usually also projects which are developed on a voluntary basis. So also don't be too harsh with yourself and force you to use something you don't want to use. What you can always do is leave us more questions or comments also in the document, but I actually would jump to the next part and also hand it over to Andre, because unfortunately I have another meeting, and a very important one, which I have to prepare also another presentation in about 10 minutes, and thus will leave now. We will see each other in the next cohort call, and Andre, give it a go.
Sorry, just a second. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Not share, sorry.
That's what I did before as well.
Right, so here. So we're going to talk about minimal viable. So thank you a lot, Alex, for conducting the meeting so far. Good luck with our next meeting. And we move on with minimal viable documentation, right? So by now, as you know, we're asking you guys to keep documenting and updating your projects. And I think a main point is that your documentation needs to evolve with the project, right? And it's very common for projects that people basically say, I'm going to worry about documentation later, right? And this is a little bit of a bad practice, because like a month from now, maybe even like 2 days from now, you don't remember why you took a certain decision. So it's always good to keep documenting things as you go, so things keep evolving, but always start with the basics, right? With the essentials. And by that, we mean that your documentation, the minimal viable one, should have actually lists, right? Like this is the minimal viable thing. And the lists that we thought are the most important ones are a list of materials, a list of tools needed, and a list of skills, right? And by that, we mean if like I'm coming to see Andrea's project, right? And I feel super excited. Oh, I want to contribute to this. But then I might feel a little bit scared that I might not have all of the necessary skills to build it. But if there is a list of things saying, look, this is what you need to know, I either know already like right before, or that I have all of the skills, or even if I don't have all of the skills, I know what is needed. So I can either try to learn things myself, or I can find somebody near me who can contribute to contributing with this project, right? So a list of skills is a very nice way of make the whole thing more inviting for people to come in. So for instance, another example is, let's say you have a task, which is, I want to translate the documentation from English to German, right? So the only skill needed for this is to actually know English and German. And so people feel enticed to come in and contribute to that, right? So it's not supposed to be seen as a thing that will put people off, but more of the like, look, if you have these skills, and most people have a lot of them, this is something you can contribute with, right? And then you should also have basically a developer and a user guide, and always a contribution guideline, which is something that you already have, that will guide and set the tone of your community, right? This will allow people to come in and contribute. And then here we split developer and user guides, because these are sometimes very similar, but quite different things. So user guides would be like the export files, right? So what do you need to press and play and put together to get this thing working? And developer one would be basically the source files, right? Like, so the developer guide tells you, look, you need to modify this file, which contains this information, so that you can change, let's say, the system from metric to imperial, right? As it was mentioned before, and then do the alterations that you want. And so we were going to have another breakout room, but being mindful of time, and because we had such a lively discussions, I think we're going to skip this breakout room and the build skills. But I would like to open for questions and comments that you have for basically the minimum viable documentation, or if you want to share how your documentation is going so far, if things have changed quite a bit from the very beginning of the cohort until now, if you have restructured the documentation, if anybody has comments in that sense.
I have not a comment, but a question.
Yes.
Actually, hello everybody from Experts, and I'm into electronics. So for me, I joined today. It would be interesting to look at the projects, and I figured out that we're talking about iHear and Stereo Ninja projects. And I just go over to the open hardware makers in the projects section and tried to find documentation, something. I was able to find Hackaday.io for Stereo Ninja, but unfortunately, I was unable to find anything about iHear. There is a documentation on the Notion, but I need to register there somehow to access it. And then it's engineeringgood.org, and I also cannot reach that website. Guys, where to look at?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was still working on the documentation aspect. That's why I've been kind of quiet, because I'm not really like the technical volunteers working on iHear. Yeah, I think the Notion page was really, when I joined the team, it was also just like a collection of like different thoughts and files. So as someone who has like no technical background, I also have no idea how to contribute to the project. So but the people who are working on iHear don't really like documentation. And so that's why we're kind of like working backwards of sorts on like the bill of materials and trying to come up with like a one-page GitHub front website page to have all the iHear materials. Can I just ask, right, if we are not able to make it in time for I know there was a Google Forms requiring us to fill in the information by tomorrow. If we're not able to make it for tomorrow's deadline, is there a possibility to have a deadline extension, or is there another like expert review happening soon? Or is that the only expert review happening during OHM?
So that's the only expert review happening. And you can really just put together whatever you have at the moment. I mean, of course, the deadline is tomorrow, but let's say you're gonna do it by the end of Sunday night, that's fine-ish, right? But we need to get this out to the experts so that they have time to look at things, right? And so I would recommend not missing this opportunity, because as Dennis is here, we have a list of experts who have many, many years of experience with documenting and open hardware and so on. So it's a great opportunity to get pointers, even if it is at a stage where you think this is not something that I would like to share publicly yet. I think still there is space to learn stuff and to improve and get suggestions for improvement. So definitely recommend not missing this one. And so of course it's not like tomorrow night, either you did it or not and so on, but please don't be much later than maybe like the end of the weekend. And if you can, I think what Dennis is trying to say is that one of the websites you're sharing is not leading anywhere. So maybe there is a typo on the website. So maybe check that as well. Is it engineering good or engineering for good, I thought?
Yes.
Right, but there was recently some stuff happening internally, so I don't think the link accessible right now.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's fine. That stuff happens, right? And it's totally fine. But do share. I mean, if you're already putting things on GitHub, what you can do is actually just share that GitHub link. And even if you just write down on the README, what are the next steps that you want to complete? Because then the experts will even see, okay, I know that they're going to cover these things, but they might already have suggestions based on that, right? And so just having like the next steps for your documentation plan is also a good thing. I hope that answers your question.
Okay.
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, for the Notion, just if I click the link, it's asking to register. And after the registration, it's just the main page. And I'm unable to go to the project page somehow.
Yeah.
So just update the link or copy paste the content to the GitHub, and whatever you have, it's always nice to look at it. Because for now, for me, it's just a blank project page and one picture. That's quite unfortunate. Okay, and if other project is Stereo Ninja, I see the hackaday.io site. Is there anything else? Is there a GitHub page?
Yes, we started a GitHub page, but the repository is mainly empty at the moment. So the next thing would be to take the content we already have on hackaday.io and put it on the repository like in a structured way. But this did not happen yet.
Okay, that's fine. Great project so far. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the comments, Danny. So just being mindful of time, everybody, I'm just going to share one last time to talk about the next steps. So basically, next week, we're not meeting, so we're not having a cohort call. We do have a mentor week next week. So make sure you have scheduled a meeting with your mentor. As I said, there is no cohort call. So the next one is May 18th. So on that week. On Monday, you'll receive again one of our Monday emails with week 8 outline, which we're going to be talking about road mapping and basically planning for the future. And as usual, drop us a line, write on the Gosh forum, whatever it is that you feel comfortable with contacting us in case there are any sorts of questions or comments or anything that you'd like to address. And yeah, so thank you for being here today. And don't forget, we were just talking about this, but do send your information for the expert review. Complete the form. I shared that on the Google Doc that we're sharing. There is also on the emails that we've been sending. Please do it, if not by tomorrow, as soon as you can until the end of the weekend. And if you have questions, now it's a good time to make them. If you don't, then thank you very much for being here today. And we'll see each other no later than in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.